If you haven't watched part 1 of my Jak and Daxter retrospective, go watch that first. Some stuff might make more sense if you watch the series in chronological order like a normo. Jak and Daxter was great. Jak and Daxter was fucking great. It was tight, it looked beautiful, it was a bit short and easy, but there are very few 3D platformers that play as perfectly as Jak and Daxter did. Naughty Dog had really struck gold when they came up with the titular duo, so they began developing a sequel to the surprise hit straight away, but it still remained to be seen as to what they could possibly do with a sequel. What amazing new concept could they add to the game to spruce it up, to make it similar enough to its predecessor while also keeping the gameplay fresh? Goatees. Yep, Jak's got a goatee. Makes the game entirely different like you would not believe. Also, there's a couple guns in there or something, I don't know, I didn't really pay much attention. So yeah, right away you'll notice that Jak 2, known as Jak 2 Renegade in Australia and Europe, is a hell of a lot edgier than its kid-friendly predecessor. I've played through the game 3 times now, and each time I came out really surprised that the game only had a PG rating. It's so dark and violent compared to the first game's bright landscapes and bouncy characters. Why would parents ever buy this game for their child? Let's start off with the story then. If you collected, spoiler alert, if you collected all the power cells in Jak 1, you're treated with a silly little cutscene that practically all but confirms Jak 2's existence. They discover a Rift Rider and a precursor ring, and Kira tinkers with it for a bit. I'd like her to tinker with my undercarriage, if you know what I mean. Anyway, they activate it and, well... They jump into a portal and ride the Rift to a place called Haven City, one part futuristic, one part third world slum. They nary have enough time to scratch their nuts as a bunch of red guys come along and capture Jak. Daxter poops himself, of course, and runs off to have an adventure in his own PSP spin-off game. After a time skip, we cut to Jak being experimented on with Dark Eco by Mr. Krabs, Baron Praxis. When the coast is clear, Daxter decides he's had enough of starring in a spin-off and rescues Jak. Incidentally, do you remember the problem where Jak never talked in the first game? Neither do I, but you know what they say, if it ain't broke, that's a good.
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
What the heck was that? Sheesh! Remind me not to piss you off.
Woof, I got giddy when I heard Daxter say crap in the first game. This game throws profanities around like sperm at a Star Wars screening, so we're thrown into familiar territory to start with. There's not much to comment about here. Jak still has tight jump controls and his moveset is entirely the same, except he doesn't do that cha thing when he spin kicks anymore, which is fucking shit. Shame on you, Naughty Dog. Also, while I appreciate a good ragdoll effect, it does kind of feel like hitting enemies has less impact than it did in the first game. I don't know, it just feels off for some reason. So the two bust out of prison, and when they escape, they come across a little boy and an old man, and after you beat up some of these guys, who are from the Crimson Guard with a K, he offers to help out by telling Jak to go meet some guy named Torn. And this is where everything starts to change. You see, unlike its predecessor, you won't be running around on foot in Jak 2. No, instead, feel free to help yourself to one of these lovely little hovercars. No, that's okay, that guy doesn't need it. He lives in a slum, where does he need to drive to? An exquisite dinner party? Yeah, so in case you haven't put 2 and 2 together, Jak 2 is a Grand Theft Auto clone. Well, it's sort of. I mean, you can't kill pedestrians. Oh, never mind. Well, at least you can't do drive-by. Son of a bitch, this is GTA! Okay, it's not really a GTA clone. It's structured similarly to GTA, but some of the missions are probably more comparable to The Simpsons Hit and Run. Oh, Homer, you ugly bastard. Anyway, more on that in a second. Back to the story briefly. The game has some nice cutscenes with great animation and pretty good voice acting, but it can feel a little directionless. For a fair chunk of the game, you're simply doing missions that help out the city and whatnot. Go turn on the water at the pumping station. Go destroy that ammo dump. It'll hurt the Crimson Guard big time. Go deliver this payment of eco to one of my suppliers. I always dreaded heading to a mission marker only to hear that Torn or someone else needed help with something that ultimately feels pretty arbitrary to the main plot. Having said that, the overall story and all of its characters are way more engaging than in its predecessor. You've got Samos and Kira returning from the previous game, Errol, who becomes somewhat of a rival during the game's racing missions, Ashlyn, who I actually do not find attractive in the slightest and I'm not even joking, Tess, an advocate of bestiality, Sig, the token black guy who will probably be the first to die, and Onan and Pekka, a wise old saggy tits lady and a pet bird monkey thing who speaks on a saggy titted behalf. God damn, those are some saggy tits. The story may drag at times, but the characters and their usually funny interactions help keep it alive. Our first mission, then, is to prove ourselves to this raspy-voiced redhead by stealing a Crimson Guard flag from the top of some dilapidated tower. Okay, fair enough, but we're still punching stuff. If I remember correctly, if you look past the goatee, there's a gun in Jak's hands. So when do we get to shoot stuff?
1 hour later.
Okay, I've done like 5 missions now, and I still don't have my pointy bang bang. I'm starting to feel like this is false advertising. Oh, there it is. Okay, that's 1 whole hour we had to go without shooting something. Well, this game wouldn't hold up very well today, am I right? Am I right? Am I right or what? Huh? Am I right?
Yes, you are. Just get on with it.
At this point, you're now working for crew. This guy, whoa, okay then. Oh my god, look at his little stick legs, he's so cute. Now that we've been better acquainted with our new boomstick, we're off with this guy, Sig, for another pointless endeavor. Thankfully, you're now equipped with the morph gun, a gun that can be upgraded so that it can pretty much become a different gun at a moment's notice. For now, we're stuck with the scattergun, which is literally another name for a shotgun. The firing rate isn't very dependable, it doesn't do much damage, and its range is short, meaning it isn't extremely effective. The scattergun works better as a complement to your melee abilities and the other weapons you get later. In fact, there's actually only 4 guns available. As well as the scattergun, there's the blaster, which is pretty much just a rifle, the Vulcan barrel, which has a high fire rate but low damage output, and the Peacemaker, which shoots a big charge shot that also shocks enemies nearby. To be frank, while all the guns have their uses throughout the game, you'll probably find yourself using the blaster a lot. It's accurate, relatively powerful, has a lot of bullets, and you can do this with it. There's a reason for this, and in game theory it's known as strategic dominance. But that's just a theory. This is the theory that when a player discovers a particular strategy or move within a game and it works better than any other strategy, the player will continue to use that strategy, ignoring all other techniques that the player may have access to. In Jak 2, jumping, spinning, and pressing fire with the blaster equipped is the dominant strategy. You'll probably end up doing it a lot because the game is very difficult. You can only withstand about 4 hits until you die, 8 from smaller enemies. That's not so bad. What makes it bad is the fact that you're constantly surrounded by enemies who attack the second they get close, and there are very few invincibility frames after getting hit, which means, well, you're gonna be dying a lot. Using the spin kick, shooty, whatever works best, but even then you don't know what enemy is going to be hit, let alone whether or not it'll even hit it. The combat can be fun when it works, but more often than not you just get caught in scenarios where your health drops to 0 quicker than you can say too edgy for me. The game isn't always unfair though. In fact, there are a lot of missions that prove to be difficult, but in a fun, fair, and challenging way. I personally enjoy the missions that had more of a focus on platforming rather than missions that involved a lot of shooting and driving. Oh, by the way, whether you like it or not, you'll be doing a lot of driving. You'll drive to missions, which are usually several minutes apart, and you'll also drive during some missions. They're not exactly easy to handle either, and most of them, except for this one, are irritatingly slow. And this is mostly how the game flows. Grab a zoomer, head on over to one of the many mission markers on your map, listen to that character's woes for a minute, and watch Daxter do whatever the fuck he feels like doing because whatever. Drive to the next location, do the mission, rinse, repeat. The gunplay is mixed up with a large variety of other mission types. Sometimes you'll be hoverboarding around at the speed of average, pulling off your best Rob Dyrdek impression, which is skateboarding lingo for you'll probably suck ass, while other times you'll be partaking in some good old-fashioned motorsport. Also, fuck these missions! You got 5 laps to clamber into first place and then attempt to stay there, all while putting up with some very frustrating handling and physics, which all culminate into a big frustrated shriek as you try to take a shortcut on the final lap and fucking die. Man, shoehorning racing into platforms is the worst. There's also turret sections, some of which are okay, but this one in particular really wets my sheets. You're constantly surrounded by airborne enemies, some of which you won't see coming until after they've already shot you. It's complete bullshit, and I only ever beat it because of a fluke. And the cherry on top of this bullshit sundae? Checkpoints are so scarcely used you'd think they were some sort of rare commodity. More often than not, you'll make your way through a large chunk of the mission, succumb to an untimely demise, then find yourself at the start of the mission again. Some missions have well-placed checkpoints, while the others just seem to have no checkpoints for no good reason, and it's really discouraging at times. There's one particular mission about halfway through the game that puts you here on the map, and you gotta make it to here on the map. Easy enough. Except there's an infinitely respawning amount of Crimson Guard being dropped down on top of you. The dropships will shoot you if you get too close, and if you fall in the water you get one hit by this weird robot thing. Fuck this mission, and whoever thought it up. It took me half an hour to beat it, and how did I do it? I didn't use my gun, I just spammed the punch attack. The dropships couldn't shoot me then. Fucking A+ game design. There are some other bullshit scenarios, but I'll get back to those in a sec. At the very least, on a basic level, everything looks and plays really well. The level design is mostly excellent, save for 1 or 2 levels towards the end which are either confusing or bland, and there's even a puzzle here or there. One of my favourite moments was finding these floating cubes, and to get across the gap you had to punch the cubes to make them unravel, while taking into account how many sides of the cube are left. You have to hit them in a specific order of directions, and I felt pretty proud of myself after having solved the puzzle using only my extremely well-developed mind. You didn't see that. Visually, the game is a treat, and it still looks pretty good today, especially if you pick up the HD remaster on PS3. It's all very clean looking despite the gritty dystopian setting, and it all runs at a solid 60 frames per second, though it does tend to dip to 30 while flying a zoomer through the city. Animations, especially lip movements, are hugely improved upon. Daxter no longer looks like a mental patient. His mouth is rounder and smoother and overall a lot less frightening. It's a much better look for him and makes Daxter more tolerable compared to his previous incarnation. Ugh. Overall, the visuals aren't a huge step forward, but considering the first game was already gorgeous, it didn't need to improve all that much. Few games could contend with Jak 2 at the time. Whoa, they're tons of fun. You gotta work the hips more. Ain't nobody gonna flash their cash if you don't put your hip into it. Also, lose some weight. Voice acting is mostly top-notch, almost Hollywood-esque in quality. Some voices, like Torn's, do great a little because the only setting his voice has is sleepover whisper talk, but otherwise, unlike a lot of 3D platformers of its era, there was a lot of consideration that went into the voice actors and their voice direction, as well as their facial expressions. It's also nice to see that while Jak 2 adapts well to its new grittier tone and atmosphere, there's still a lot of humor, and it never feels out of place either. As I said, sometimes the story feels like it's going nowhere, but the cutscenes are a joy to watch. Especially the one where Daxter gets fucking pissed! Music's forgettable. What? Sorry, I mean, it's good, but I can't remember any of it, except for that one that plays when flying around Haven City. Do 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 do. Fuck, now it's stuck in my head! So for the first 2/3 of the game, despite the occasionally very harsh difficulty, it's still a really enjoyable game. Even the bosses that show up at the end of each third, though difficult, are still fun. But then you reach the final third. The difficulty spike here is insane. Cheap deaths become the norm, frustration replaces all existing emotion. Essentially, you're gonna have a bad time. There are 3 reasons. The first is the race against Errol, which takes you through almost the entirety of the city. The zoomers are hard enough to handle outside of missions, let alone making them the focus of a race. The second reason is the set of 3 missions that require you to use a mech suit. This thing is slow, it's clunky, and it does jack shit against enemies, which, I don't know, kinda defeats the purpose of a mech suit. In Fallout 4, hopping into a set of power armor makes you feel like a badass, like you can take on anything. In Jak 2, this awesome looking mech is delegated to simple block puzzles. If you want to kill enemies, you're better off jumping out of the mech and shooting them. And hey, let's make these sections even more dull by putting one of them underwater. What fucking stick of celery came up with that idea? Okay, I mean that's pretty terrible in its own right, but there's one mission that tops the mech sections in terms of sheer frustration.
Quiet, here comes Pretty Boy.
Yep, that one Escort Mission. If you've played this mission before, then no doubt you share some of my pain. You need to escort these 3 mediocre dunces through the sewers and protect them from any metalheads that attack them. Escort missions are already, for a lack of a better word, shit, but this one takes the shitty cake. There's rarely a moment where you aren't swarmed by metalheads from all directions. There are no health packs or checkpoints, and if you accidentally hit one of these guys, they've got no problem capping you back. And to top it all off, there's a horde of metalheads waiting for you at the end. This mission took me 45 minutes alone and about 30 retries. Seriously, fuck this mission. The only way you can beat it is if you happen to have Dark Jak available, and if you don't, you gotta grind the mission for Dark Eco until Dark Jak becomes available again. Seriously, fuck this mission! Oh hey, I forgot to mention Dark Jak. So, because of the Baron's experiments, Jak can now transform into a Dark Alter Ego, which sports more powerful melee attacks and a few special finishing attacks, as well as invincibility after a while. Thing is, I never really use Dark Jak because A, I never have it available because it's never charged up, or B, I just completely forget about it. So it only ever really helped with this mission then. The final third of Jak 2 is just so unenjoyable at times that it almost brings the whole experience down with it. More checkpoints would have been the simplest way to relieve some of the frustration, and thankfully this is something that they took into account when making Jak 3, but holy crap. I would rather castrate myself than play through this part of the game again. Seriously, I've done it before and I'll do it again. Okay, I've calmed down. Let's wrap up the story then. By the way, spoiler alert. If you want, you can skip to this time to avoid spoilers. I'll wait. Earlier in the game, we discover that Baron Praxis has been meeting with the Metalhead leader in secret and working out a deal with each other. The Baron pays Core in Eco to keep the Metalheads out of the city, and to help maintain his position on the throne. We also discover that Haven City isn't another world, but their own world in the future, which Jak finds out when he discovers Samos' hut from the first game. But what about this kid who keeps showing up in the background? He's apparently the rightful heir to the throne, but he has to go on some trial first and get the Precursor Stone or some MacGuffin crap. But he's too young, so Jak does it, and funds the Precursor Stone at the end of a set of trials, which is one of my favorite levels in the game, by the way. There's a ton of challenging platforming and even a section where you play as Daxter in a very Crash Bandicoot-inspired chase scene. Just can't let the past go, can ya? Whoop! Praxis steals the stone and takes off with it. He plans to crack it open and take advantage of its power, and the destruction of the stone is left to Crew, who, well...
No! Yo, holy shit, he dead!
Metalheads soon invade the city. Jak heads off to confront Core, who turns out to be this old man. Jesus, dude, what happened to your face? I didn't think you were allowed to do that, you know. That's kind of in poor taste. Anyway, he boops the Baron for us, so Jak and Daxter head off to confront Core in the Metalhead nest. And surprisingly, it's quite an easy boss fight. I mean, it's still hard, but in comparison to the shit that we had to deal with earlier, I'll take it. Core dies, but not before revealing the totally not obvious bombshell that the kid is actually a young Jak, which raises so many questions, but we should probably save that for another video. In reality, Jak was sent to the past to learn the necessary skills to beat up Core. He touches a stone, then some naked guy pops out. Fuck, I don't know. So instead of Jak, Daxter, and friends returning to their own time, they send young Jak and young Samos, yep, back in time instead. And Jak, Daxter, Kira, and the extremely out of place Samos decide to stay in Haven City and live out their lives in peace. And that's Jak 2, baby! It's frustrating beyond belief at times, especially when you reach the final few missions, but, you know, I still had a great time with it. The characters are endearing, the humor is still present despite the shift in tone, and while it is fucking hard, the gameplay is still as tight as ever. And for all those masochists out there, there's a hero mode, which unlocks after you find 200 precursor orbs, which, by the way, are enough of a pain in the ass to get in the first place. Hero mode starts you on a new save file, with all 4 morph gun mods available from the start, but to compensate for that, enemies are now harder to kill. You know, the game's already hard enough without you needing to add a hard mode. No, thank you. Despite the difficulty, I really do recommend giving this game a go, because while the game does kick your ass every now and then, it's actually pretty satisfying beating these hard levels. When Jak 2 released, it was met with critical acclaim, with 9s and 10s flying about everywhere, which, I mean, 9s and 10s, I don't necessarily agree with the fucking 10s. Fucking 10 out of 10, what the fuck is this shit? So, obviously, Naughty Dog needed to continue the franchise. They needed to milk this yak out for all it was worth. But where could it go from here? Naughty Dog pulled off such a drastic shift in tone extremely well, so they could do anything well, right? Right? I mean, sort of, yeah.
Whoa, this puppy's got some vibration to it. This baby will put a smile on your face.
I don't have a meme for this one, I just find it really funny.
And boom, baby! We storm the nest, guns blazing. Hell, we'll take them all on together. You and me, side by side. Nothing'll stop us, cause
Look, honestly, I don't know how to segue into this properly, so this time I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. For this video, I want to recommend Sir Toasty. Sir Toasty is one of the best YouTubers I've ever watched, and I'm not even joking. I recently came across one of his older videos about Pokemon Black and White and what those games mean to him, and it's such a great video that I implore every single one of you to watch it. I mean, the rest of his channel's great, absolutely, and I mean, honestly, I'd kill for a voice like that. If you're into my stuff, you're probably going to find Sir Toasty's videos really enjoyable too. Check out the link in the description if you're interested.